I've got a lot of pet peeves when it comes to the NBA, and extremely biased, half-baked arguments rank up at the top. That's why I gave you guys the videos with MJ and Kobe around a month ago to set some records straight. About a month later, and I finally run into another argument similar to those that I really do hate enough to make a video for, mostly because we hear arguments that sound exactly like this one to this very day. I heard this argument for about the 1000th time the other day and figured it's finally time to go ahead and do away with this one. What's up, NBA fans? Dom2K on the mic, and every season that LeBron James doesn't win MVP is another season that fans claim he was robbed, because according to some people, he should have won MVP for like the last 10 seasons now. While I totally agree you could never understate the value LeBron brings to a team, there's no way he gets my vote in a season like this where you had Westbrook averaging a triple-double to carry a Thunder squad whose second best player was probably Oladipo. Meanwhile, you had the Cavs getting second seed in the Eastern Conference despite having at least 2 All-Stars on the floor at any time. But that's beside the point. I've made plenty of 2017 MVP videos already. Today, I'm here to dismantle the stale argument that the sole MVP of Derrick Rose in 2011 wasn't deserved because, yep, you guessed it, LeBron should have got it. So let's lay the groundwork. The most common argument for people who believe LeBron was robbed for one of his 10 potential MVPs is that the media was biased against him. This was the year 2011 when LeBron decided to spurn the Cavaliers on national TV and then take part in a party afterwards claiming how easy things were going to be. This caused a national uproar in the sports world as LeBron faced hate at the same level KD gets today for joining the Golden State Warriors. Supporters of this argument believe the hate biased the voting against LeBron, causing the MVP to default to Derrick Rose. The argument that accompanies this is the comparing of stat lines for the season. Stats can be a terrible thing years later because they tend to be all that people look at, and this hurts especially for people who didn't actually watch the players during that season, but we're gonna do it anyways because that's the popular argument. LeBron's runner-up season saw him put up 26.7 points, 7 assists, 7.5 rebounds, 1.6 steals, and 51% field goal shooting. Of course, this was only slightly lower than what he did the year before, but still amazing considering he now shared the court with 2 other stars. Compare that to Rose's line of 25 points, 7.7 assists, 4.1 rebounds, a steal, and 44.1% shooting. So of course LeBron has the better stat line, but I'm about to show you why you never depend on those alone for your argument. First off, Rose led the Chicago Bulls to their first 60-win season since Michael Jordan retired. As a matter of fact, the record was identical to the '98 Bulls that won the championship, and of course it earned them the first seed in the East over Miami. I have to remind you that we're talking about the East when it was still a good conference, featuring the Boston Celtics Big 4 at that point, the Miami Heat Big 3, and the Orlando Magic with the superstar Dwight Howard, who actually placed second in MVP voting. Meanwhile, the newly formed Super Friends with LeBron fresh off of an MVP season, Dwayne Wade before his knees expired, and Chris Bosh, who was a top power forward, finished second in the East with a 58-24 record. This is pretty significant when considering that year's MVP because, first of all, nobody had the Bulls on the map to make any noise, and more importantly, Rose wasn't on the map to be an MVP candidate. Just one season before, the Bulls were an A seed with a 41-41 record, so they were just 500. Their biggest offseason acquisition, Carlos Boozer, who yes, was still a quality big man in 2011, however he was also a defensive liability. So when Derrick Rose asked coming into that season, why can't I be the MVP of the league, it was because not only would he be just 22 years old, he'd be on a Bulls team that wouldn't have a hope of getting the first seed in the top heavy Eastern Conference, which does play heavy into who gets MVP for a season. You know what else didn't help his chances? The fact that their best free agent pickup in Carlos Boozer ended up breaking his hand before the season by apparently tripping over his gym bag at his home, causing him to miss every game up until December 1st, while other injuries assured he would only play 59 games total. Oh, and to top that off, the injuries between both Noah and Boozer that season would cause a 38-year-old Kurt Thomas to become the starting big man for a total of 37 games. Kurt Thomas, who averaged 4.1 points and 6 rebounds for the entire season. That's their starting big man. So basically, to accomplish his goal, Rose was tasked with being the sole ball handling scorer on a team where 2 of the best players would be in and out of the lineup with subpar replacements. Meanwhile, LeBron was in Miami with the impossible situation of dealing with an elite Dwayne Wade and a dynamic Chris Bosh on both sides. Okay, so let's fast forward to 2017 where Kevin Durant just won Finals MVP after an amazing performance. Detractors of KD claim that his amazing series wasn't so amazing because he played with great teammates, which made it easier for him to get his shots compared to LeBron, who had a harder time with his roster. These are the same detractors that put LeBron's stat line with Wade and Bosh from 2011 next to Rose's stat line with Kurt Thomas and Keith Bogans. Alrighty then, so now that I've mentioned Keith Bogans, I need to talk more about both the rosters that year. Besides the point Chicago's big man was switching in and out of the lineup during Rose's MVP season, we do need to cover the fact that Rose's starting shooting guard was Keith Bogans, who averaged 4.1 points and basically one of everything else. He also had an amazing choice in Ronnie Brewer, who averaged 6.2 points a game but did nothing to space the floor by shooting 22% from the 3-point line. He did have a good option in Kyle Korver for spot-up shooting and the second best scorer on the team in Luol Deng, but the only person who shared any true ball handling duties with Rose was the backup point guard CJ Watson, who played 13 minutes a game. And you're probably going to throw Joakim Noah in my face, but A, remember 2011 Noah was not the same 2013 Noah that was getting MVP votes, and B, that wouldn't matter anyways because Noah was included in that big man tandem of injuries I just mentioned. He only played 48 games the whole season. The Bulls' prized free agent pickup Boozer, who missed significant time, averaged 17.5 points and 9.6 rebounds on 51% shooting. Now, that's not bad, but let's compare that to the Miami Heat's third option player Chris Bosh, who put up 18.7 points and 8.3 rebounds on basically 50% shooting, as he was confined to his spot-up role in the offense, so he couldn't even do everything he was actually capable of. Oh, and let's not forget Dwayne Wade, whose numbers don't look a whole lot different than Rose's for that entire season. Is it starting to look like LeBron James may have had it just a tad bit easier than Rose had it that season in terms of a supporting cast? Well, that's because he did. But we're not done. I need to hammer Rose's impact in because it can't be all about their situations. Rose almost single-handedly took the Bulls' offense from being ranked 27th in 2010 all the way up to 11th in the very next season. This team that had very little to work with moved up 16 spots for Rose's MVP year, and just to drive this point home, in the 2 seasons after Rose caught the injury bug, the Bulls fell back to 23rd and 28th spots in offense. Further proving that Rose was Chicago's offense that year, his usage rating was 32% for the season, and while it is true that LeBron's usage rating was almost equal to that, so was Dwayne Wade's, meaning there was somebody else making things happen on the floor when the ball wasn't in LeBron's hands. Compare that to Rose's second best teammate Luol Deng, who only posted a 20% usage rating, going back to the fact that this Bulls squad basically started and ended with what Rose could do with the ball, who by the way participated in 81 games out of a possible 82 that year. But let's talk about how transcendent Rose was as a point guard, which I believe is the most forgotten part when people make the argument against his MVP case. We'll get to the eye test in a minute, but first an amazing stat. There's been 3 players in the modern era to post 2,000 points and 600 assists in a season. That list is confined to LeBron James, Michael Jordan, and Derrick Rose. And for those of you wondering, no, it wasn't in 2011 when LeBron accomplished this feat, that was Derrick Rose. This becomes more impressive when you consider the fact that Rose accomplished this as a 6'3", 22-year-old point guard playing on a team with exactly 0 All-Stars to pass to and nobody to take the pressure off his ball handling duties. To show you just how special that season was, we examine a night against the future NBA champions of that season. On January 20th of 2011, the Bulls hosted the Mavericks with, again, no Carlos Boozer and no Joakim Noah because they were injured. To make matters worse, Rose would be tasked with carrying the Bulls against the Western heavyweight while Luol Deng would shoot a smoking 3 for 13, on top of the fact that no other Bull aside from Rose would score in double digits. Compare that to the Mavs, who would get 4 double-digit scores that night. Despite these limitations, Rose would post 26 points, 9 assists, and 7 rebounds while playing 43 minutes and leading the Bulls to a 5-point win over the eventual champions of that season. What was more significant here? By that year, only 2 people had managed to win a game in which none of their teammates scored double digits in the last 10 years. Of course, those 2 were Kobe Bryant in 2005 and LeBron James in 2008, coincidentally 2 players that were playing with minimal help on the offensive end just like Derrick Rose. To quantify Rose's excellence that season even more, he was the only point guard that ranked top 10 in scoring, of course meaning he led point guards in scoring. We're talking about a league with Chris Paul, Westbrook, Darren Williams shortly before the Grim Reaper took his career. Basically, Rose was tasked with orchestrating his entire offense while handling the scoring that a shooting guard usually takes care of, and he did it. He did this en route to leading the Bulls to the best record in the entire league. We're talking about 2011 here, which was one of the more competitive seasons in recent memory. You had the 61-21 Spurs, future champion Mavericks, Big 3 Heat, Big 4 Celtics, Dwight's Magic, Kobe Bryant's Lakers looking to repeat, and the up-and-coming Thunder. Yes, Rose easily had the least offensive help out of any of those teams I just named, and he propelled them to a better record than all of them, who, by the way, all won 52+ games. And he didn't just lead the Bulls to having a better season than all of them, but he also led the Bulls to beating most of them. The Bulls played these teams in 19 games and they posted a 13-6 record. Derrick Rose was amazing as he averaged 26.9 points, 6.8 assists, and 4.1 rebounds through all 19 games. So yeah, the guy was pretty amazing. And now I just want to cap off his Herculean efforts by jogging your memory so you can recall what you actually saw, or in some of your cases didn't see. Derrick Rose not only pulled off an underrated carry job on the offensive end, he did it in one of the most aesthetically pleasing ways we'd ever seen. We're not talking about being safe and launching threes from the perimeter, we're talking about going over and through opposing defenses with ridiculous displays of athleticism that we might not ever see again. Imagine Russell Westbrook, but more in control of his body combined with a softer touch at the rim. Basically, he could explode into the lane, contort his body in any direction, and then softly lay the ball into the rim, or he could just ditch that and dunk on your biggest defender, which he did multiple times. Yes, Rose was getting his points the hard way, which is a playstyle that demanded maybe a little too much as we see his body just couldn't handle it, but to this day I'll never forget seeing Rose twist into the lane, cuffing the ball like a football player only to finish at an angle nobody else could see aside from him. But my amazement at his moves doesn't do enough to push his argument for MVP. I'll just let you see what some other people said that he was actually competing against. Jason Kidd went as far as to say that he thought that Derrick Rose had the tools to be the best player the game had ever seen and was definitely the MVP. Tyson Chandler directly alluded to how he propelled his team to higher levels, putting his unofficial vote down for MVP. Charles Barkley commended his leadership for carrying the Bulls to the top record without two of his best players. Chris Bosh, who was a teammate of LeBron James, admitted Rose looked like the best player and an MVP because you'd have nothing if you took him off the Bulls. Juwan Howard, who was a teammate of LeBron, chose to forego being politically correct to endorse a teammate and chose Derrick Rose. He also earned nods from Kevin Love, Steve Nash, and Zach Randolph, and even LeBron James himself said it was Rose, citing the injuries that the team had dealt with. How do you find it within yourself to argue that LeBron James was the MVP that year when he didn't even think he was the MVP? Speaking of LeBron, look, he had a case for MVP as he often does. It's not like he didn't get votes for it. His stat line was amazing, he looked amazing in general as he always does, and if you're into all the advanced stats like PER and player win shares per 48 minutes, yes, LeBron did amazing there too. But on the subject of efficiency, again, I'm speaking directly to Kevin Durant's detractors from the finals. You've all said out of your own mouths that Kevin Durant was put in an easier situation than LeBron this year, so it's no wonder that he looked so good. How does that not apply to a 6'3" point guard scoring and assisting on 70% of his team points with 0 All-Stars while LeBron had a second teammate good enough to be MVP that year? Wasn't that you guys' exact problem with Durant right now, that he had less pressure with Steph Curry to worry about? Oh, and by the way, the MVP is a regular season award, which is something else that seems to be forgotten. Rose led the Bulls to a sweep of Miami during the regular season, which is what the award is for. And I'm not gonna fail to mention Noah didn't even play in the last game they played, meaning Kurt Thomas picked up his minutes against the Heat. I think where your argument falls apart if you claim that LeBron deserved MVP over Rose here is that A, you're basing it off of the emotional plea that LeBron was just too hated to win MVP that season, and B, you base the rest of your entire argument off of a stat line and some advanced stats that show LeBron was efficient and important to his team's wins. Your biggest mistake is that you ignore absolutely everything else involved with the argument. You fail to mention anything about the situations both players were dealt, you fail to mention anything about the regular season success the Bulls enjoyed over the Heat, despite the Heat clearly having the advantage in terms of personnel and health, and finally, you start basing your answer off of the playoffs where the Heat dominated Chicago. And you know what? This isn't so different from what happens today where people start basing their MVP opinion off of the playoff series, which is totally wrong because I still don't understand why no one can grasp that the MVP is a regular season award. It has nothing to do with who does what in any round of the playoffs. That's not what it's given for. But for what it's worth, I'll indulge in your playoff argument. Yes, Miami dominated the East playoffs and the Bulls as they exploited the fact that Rose was Chicago's only source of offense. Miami was the better team from beginning to end, which you all thought when the season started, so don't even act like you didn't. But to that, I ask you one question. What if you put Rose on Miami with Dwayne Wade, who was still moving like an MVP, and Chris Bosh, and then you gave LeBron the Bulls roster that was constantly dealing with injury, on top of the fact that he would have been the only person who could create offense for the team? Would the Bulls have still ended up at the top of the conference? Yeah, probably. LeBron has done more with less. Would the Bulls have been better than Miami featuring an MVP Rose and Wade, topped off by Bosh spreading the floor and probably playing more of his post game? Not a chance in my opinion, but I won't go any further on that because I'm not arguing about the play. playoffs. I've already argued that Rose deserved his MVP, and if it makes you feel any better, because it's never going to change that he won it, the man is done. We're 2 weeks into free agency and he hasn't even been signed yet. It's okay, you guys already won this. LeBron is still at the top and he's competing for championships every year. Do you think you can live with the fact that he lost an MVP race to the better candidate at the time? Do you have to tell everybody 6 seasons later Rose won an MVP by default of LeBron haters? It's like every time someone other than LeBron wins MVP, it's unfair to him. Rose won it, he deserved it as backed by the evidence in the video, and it's time to send this tired, burned out, over emotional argument to the shadow realm with the rest of them.